And it's official. The Premier League title race is going down to the very last day of the season. So for the neutral, best believe that's excitement. But if you're an Arsenal fan or a City fan or even a United fan today, you might have different feelings. We will get to that in a bit. I've got my boy Shaka here with me.
I like how you've separated yourself from United fans. If you're a United fan, oh man.
Oh man, if you're a United fan like myself, then I don't know how much more horrendous you can feel after this season. I think
Mhm.
that this was a game where Arsenal I mean, it wasn't Arsenal's greatest performance, but it's almost like they didn't need to just the one goal, a 1-0 win at Old Trafford, and as we said, the title race down to the last day of the season, job done. But United never really threatened them, did they?
No, no, they didn't. And if I'm to paint this in a positive light for United or slightly negative light for Arsenal, I can only say exactly as you just did, Alexis, that there was only one goal in it. And when there's just one goal in the game, who knows what can happen? A slip, a mistake, miscommunication, an absolute bolt out of the blue from somebody in red changes the our entire conversation around this game. None of those things happened. So in truth, we're talking about an Arsenal win that was a little bit closer than maybe a lot of the game felt. It was all Arsenal needed. They controlled the tempo, they controlled the ball. I'm just a little bit surprised, as I say, that they didn't maybe get into. I'll be kind. They didn't get into fourth gear in wanting to get that second goal. And so at least kept the United fans, all of you, on the edge of your seats and hoping for more, but more just never came.
I think that's the thing. You almost were hoping for more from Manchester United. You felt that obviously Arsenal again didn't necessarily need to put out their best performance because they weren't challenged as much as they
Mm.
needed to be. But um looking at United, the fact that they are winless in their last three games now, the fact that they were absolutely thrashed by Crystal Palace. I think their last win that they got was Sheffield United, a relegated Sheffield United who did scare United in that game as well.
Hmm.
You're almost wondering where that thing is going to come from. And again, we were left wondering the same thing today from United.
No, it's not. I mean, United over recent weeks, probably the highlight, and I can say this as somebody who's not a United fan, but the highlight of the weekends almost is Eric Ten Hag's post-game press conferences. Just wondering what he's going to come up with now,
Yeah.
to try to explain or what we all just witnessed. Try to convince us not to believe our own eyes, and that's where we are right now with Manchester United. And just to speak about from a neutral perspective or an analyst perspective about United and maybe how far that bar has been lowered is the opening 10 or 15 minutes. I'm thinking United are looking good here. They're
Mm.
really playing well. And then I just stop and think, but Raya hasn't had a thing to do. For as
Yep.
good as Arsenal have been, Raya has just I can't remember him taking a cross. Pretty sure he didn't make a save, a save of any kind of note. And that's just where we are with Manchester United now, that we're almost wanting to see them find some kind of a spark, but it never really comes. And then you end up kind of hitching that wagon onto, you know, players running around a lot, and as though that's supposed to mean something. And that for me is a scary place to be when you consider the Manchester Uniteds of old. The Manchester United that made you a fan, the Manchester United that made me as a player dread going to Old Trafford or seeing them come to any of our own home stadiums. They're just so far gone from that. It's a little bit sad.
I think it's very sad, Shaka, because the Manchester United of old, as you said, that made me become a fan, also tended to boast very strong defensive lines as well. And I know that defending has changed, has evolved as well. And, you can argue the type of defending Eric Ten Hag wants his back line to do. And the fact that he doesn't have or has not been able to field his, when what he says, his first choice back line. But let's talk about the Arsenal goal there. Yes, of course, great stuff from Kai Havertz eventually to
Mm.
Leandro Trossard. But again, you expected more, at least for United from that defensive backline, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I thought Casemiro was entirely to blame, and I guess a little bit symptomatic of who Manchester United are as a
Yeah.
football. And seeing Casemiro, particularly this season, it's maybe easy to forget how good a player he was in the white of Real Madrid. Casemiro was one of the best in the world at his position, bar none, if not the best. But now all of a sudden, seeing him look a shadow of his former self, again, kind of epitomizes everything that I was just saying about Manchester United. And now
Mm.
United in their defense, and I'm sure Eric Ten Hag will offer this at some point. Again, injuries have played a key role in how poor they've looked, particularly of late. Casemiro playing on the right side of a right-sided centre back in a back four. Left-sided centre back was Johnny Evans, who came to United in pre-season just to try to stay fit and finding a club. And lo and behold, it's Manchester United, and he's a regular starter, probably one of the more consistent regular starters for Manchester United. So that tells its own story as well. But again, as far as this game and that goal goes, it's down to Casemiro and a number of things. And yes, he's a defensive midfielder whose pass is his best, who's playing on the right side of a centre back pairing, and probably doesn't know the position as well as he does. But I think some things are just basic in football. Andrea Nana has the ball. Andrea Nana is passing the ball out or looking to clear it, and Casemiro is behind Andre Onana. That's just for starters. Why he is that deep, it's totally against every goalkeeper's instinct to turn back towards your own goal, even if it's to make a pass and a backwards pass across the face of your own goal. That was never going to happen in a month of Sunday. So I'm not sure why Casemiro took up that position to start with. And then once the ball is cleared, he just takes his jolly old time coming out. And that keeps... And Johnny Evans pushes higher up because Manchester United are trying to play this higher line. So his natural reaction is, as the ball goes, he pushes up. And it's only when when the ball kind of comes back into Kai Havertz and Evans looks around, he realizes how deep Casemiro is. He is not, even as he glances over his shoulder, as the ball is going forward, he can't even see Casemiro in his hindsight. So he pushes up thinking, yeah, this is the line. And credit to Arsenal, huge credit to Kai Havertz in recognizing where the space was, in recognizing where Casemiro was, and exploiting it. Trossard with the simplest of tap-ins. And that was the deciding goal. And it seems kind of ridiculous that's the goal that decides this game. As important a game as it was for both clubs, I felt.
Do you feel, looking at some of the United players, even the ones you just mentioned now, like Casemiro, so to speak, do you feel like they've kind of checked out already, that the wear and tear of the season is starting to show? We do have exactly 1 week till the end of the Premier League season, but that would be a concern because United still have the FA Cup final, which is probably their biggest match of the season. And we know they're most difficult because it comes against a Manchester City that, when you look at that now, Shaka, I don't know where we'd even find half an argument for them in that final, apart from the fact that, yes, it is a one-off, it is a final, anything can happen.
Yeah, I mean, one-off finals, everybody's got a puncher's chance, and that's all you can afford. Manchester United, certainly at this point. Let's keep in mind that Manchester United beat Liverpool. Was it the previous round or 2 rounds ago in a matchup that I didn't think Manchester United had any kind of a hope in. But they got the job done on the day, and now they're in the final. So they've got that puncher's hope, as I say. But with this game to be played on paper, kind of seeing who both United and City are, there's only ever going to be one winner 99 times out of 100. And that's the daunting task for Manchester United right now, because so much of their season hinges on the outcome of that FA Cup final. As we speak, Alexis, Manchester United sitting 8th. I think I'm right in saying they have not finished that low in the history of the Premier League. That only goes back to 1992. That's not the beginning of the world, people. but certainly since the Alex Ferguson era and Manchester United rising to be the club that we recognize today, it's never been this bad. As far as your question and whether they checked out, we had a similar question a couple of days ago in extra time on FC, and somebody asked, how can Ten Hag get the best out of these players with just a couple of weeks left in the season? And the truth is, he's not got the best out of them all season long. So I'm not. It's less about how many games there are left, and more to the point that he hasn't been able to find what works for this version of Manchester United and the individuals that he has at his disposal. Right now, all United could do, all United could hope for, is to play for some kind of pride. I don't know where the pride is in finishing, well, higher than seventh, which it did under David Moyes, and as their lowest previous finish before now. That's not what this team is built around. That's not what these individuals know as where they find their pride. So that's a challenge for Ten Hag. But then to your concerns, Alexis, that kind of malaise and taking that into an FA Cup final against Manchester City, it's concerning, because City against this version of United, you feel, is going to be as one-sided a game as you will see. If United's own mentalities, of their own confidence, is to drop any further, who knows how bad it possibly could be.
Well, just I suppose to kind of echo or double down on the point that you were making, because you did kind of compare the seventh place finish under David Moyes that came just right after Sir Alex Ferguson left. Mm-hmm. Wayne Rooney was talking about that recently. And even though it's just 1 point below now, or one position below in the table, being 7th to 8th now, Rooney said that he feels like this is the worst he's seen them, that this almost feels worse. It's almost like this is a new rock bottom that even in the last decade, we have not seen. And it's almost hard to believe, where do you go to build on this?
Yeah, and that's a challenge. What changes? Manchester United either don't or can't spend in the way that they once did, certainly relatively speaking. And I'm not going to get into financial fair play and the charges that are kind of hanging over certainly Manchester City at the very least. That's a discussion for a different day. We're talking about Manchester United and how do they right this ship, given some of the players that they have, given the lack of spending that we've witnessed over the last couple of seasons. To put it into some kind of context, Casemiro's got another 2 years left on his contract. And again, one of the best players of his time, but I don't think is up to the challenge of a team looking to finish top 4 or higher in the Premier League. And I say that in full recognition of who he is. But you're stuck with him for another 2 years, unless somebody, cue Saudi Arabia, comes a calling for his services. That is the only bailout here. The only other side to that is, I'm a firm believer in administration. What happens at boardroom level, what happens at management level, has an impact on what happens on the pitch. So while we've been able to blame the Glazers for years gone by, maybe Sir Jim Ratcliffe coming in now, at the time and in the role that he's taken up, is the spark that Manchester United need in turning these fortunes around. Now, that's all I can offer in terms of hope for Manchester United, what we've seen and what certainly their fans hope to see from them in the hopefully not too distant future. That leadership, that leadership counts, that leadership is telling. But right now, there's so little for Manchester United fans to look at in terms of positivity or where that spark comes from.
Well, you know, when they say that when you do something well, nobody ever really talks about you. They only talk about you more when you do something bad. That's probably what Arsenal fans need to hear right now, because we've not even fully touched on Arsenal yet. But that's because, don't worry, Gunners, you got the job done today. You pushed this title race down to the very last day of the season, regardless of what happens in City's extra match that's coming up, which is also a big match too. But Shaka, I remember a couple of weeks ago, probably a few months ago, we did talk about Arsenal after an Arsenal game. And I remember asking you, have you seen anything different in the mentality of Arsenal this season to suggest that they do have it in them to push, to not succumb to the pressure. Because as we always hear, it is easier to chase than it is to lead. And City can chase and City can lead, as we have seen before, but we weren't sure where Arsenal stood. But now here they are. They've got the job done. It's going down to the very last day of the season. So is this a new Arsenal that probably stars are aligning for them?
Absolutely. I think, listen, as critical as it was to start with of Arsenal and it only being 1-0 and it only taking one mistake or a moment of brilliance from somebody from Manchester United to turn this game around, it never looked like it was coming. It never looked like a mistake was coming. It never looked like they'd allow Manchester United that moment for somebody to have that moment of brilliance. And that's to their credit. And given kind of their capitulation to the back end of last season, this season and how they've managed this run-in has been all the more impressive. It may end up with the same result, that they finished second to Manchester City, but I think they certainly have made a far tighter fist of it this time. They've learned from those experiences, and I think they've been better as a result. But the thing is, and I remember after I was at the Emirates for Arsenal Villa, and I thought that was absolutely pivotal in who Arsenal were this season, because earlier that day, the early kickoff was Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Liverpool was sitting top. They lose to Crystal Palace, and that result, that final whistle goes as I'm walking up towards the Emirates, and the entire atmosphere just changes around the kind of expectation, the expectancy of all those Arsenal fans on the day. I was with a group of friends, Arsenal fans, and I said to them, this is defining. If Arsenal win today, they're going to win the league. If they don't win the league, because this was their moment. Beating Villa at home, they go top of the table. And as we know, they didn't. That being said, everything you've seen from Arsenal since has been absolutely fantastic. I thought, given that result and what it meant, Arteta would know. The more experienced players in that dressing room would know how big a game it was. But they were able to, again, find who they were, pick up those broken pieces and put together an incredible run towards the back end of the season. The trouble is, from an Arsenal perspective, is that it's City who are doing the leading. Yeah. And regardless of what we say about City, I have said time and time again over the last 4 or 5 months that this City team is nowhere near as good as City last season. Yeah, we sit here. The last time Manchester City lost a game in the English Premier League, December 6th, away to Aston Villa, believe it or not. Yeah. So now here we have, according to me, apparently, a substandard Manchester City who just do not lose football games, and that continues to be their strength. Until somebody can match them in terms of that running, Arsenal came close. I just don't see how anybody unseats them. Maybe from an Arsenal perspective, going to Tottenham offers their brightest hope, but sadly, what we've seen of Tottenham over recent weeks has been desperately disappointing, given what we saw from them, certainly at the very least in the first half of the season.
Well, in terms of Arsenal's new rivalry now with Manchester City that we've seen at least over the last 2 seasons, you know what they say, iron sharpens iron. But what do you think, or what difference between last season and this season now has impressed you the most? We talk a lot about the individual brilliances of Declan Rice's signing, Martin Odegaard's leadership as well, Trossard being a great addition, Saliba, who was absolutely brilliant today in just having Arsenal, manage their defense, even though, of course, Man United really didn't threaten that much. So there are a lot of individual players there too. Do you think that's it, that all the pieces just finally came together for Arteta?
Absolutely. I think key to that, and you mentioned William Saliba, who was injured, of course, for that run-in last season. Now he's fit throughout. And I think you see the difference in that. Somehow, and I hold my hand up, I have been very critical of Kai Havertz all season long, but Mikel Arteta keeps getting a tune out of him when needed. Declan Rice, for me, has been again, just kind of going back to some of our discussions on FC last week, the question was around player of the year. And my opinion was it comes down to two players. If City wins the league, Foden wins player of the year. If Arsenal win the league, it's Declan Rice. I think he has been that outstanding. I really can't underplay how good and how transformational Declan Rice has been to Arsenal. I also think in Odegaard they have a leader that they need on the park, and again a manager that I have been very critical of, particularly through the first half of this season. And Mikel Arteta knows what's needed of him and has delivered.
He has delivered indeed. We can see if he can deliver next week this time. But at least, as we said, for the neutral, it's going to be a great end to this Premier League season for Manchester City and Arsenal, fighting down straight to the wire. If you're a Manchester United supporter like myself, you could probably join me in pouring a cold one after this and wondering how they're going to pull themselves together to go up against a Manchester in that FA Cup final, which, by the way, will be on ESPN, and I will be there with Nedum Onua conveniently. But Shaka, absolute pleasure as always, my boy. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we will catch you next time on ESPN FC Live.